Jai Bhim to all of you. This is our 13th consecutive class, and we have been studying the book 2 of the Buddha and his Dhamma, and we have completed the study of part 2 so far of the book 2. And today we are going to begin with a new part 3. Before we begin, we will just have this opening chant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we saw that the book 2 is all about the conversion that the Buddha launched after his enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree. And so far we have covered a very important part of the Buddha and his Dhamma, where the Buddha has taught to the 5 parivrajaka. And thus we can say that by teaching the 5 parivrajak, the Buddha set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. It is also known as the Dhammachakra Pravartana Sutta. And we have seen that the Dhammachakra Pravartana Sutta and this sutta has some, they are not same. The way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has gone into the Buddha's first sermon to the 5 parivrajakakas. And we will see that pattern coming again and again, in a sense that Baba Sahib Ambedkar wanted to produce a book which will give a clarity to the readers in a very few pages and give them a material so that they can explore deeply on the other Buddhist text and the teachings. So on that line, this part 3, which is titled as Conversion of the High and the Holy. And I think here there are a lot of teachings that the Buddha gave in these conversions, because you don't convince the people just by by remaining silent. You have to teach, you have to share your teachings, and that is what the Buddha has done with this people whom he converted. And as a beginning of this conversion campaign, we know that the Buddha first created what is called the Panchavargiya Bhikshu. And then when Buddha was staying near Banaras, and Banaras is of course Varanasi, and Sarnath is very close to Varanasi. In fact, it's as good as part of Varanasi these days. So the first sort of conversion took place of who is known as Yashas. And this Yashas conversion is traditionally talked in a language which is not talked here in the section 1 of the part 3 of the Buddha and his Dhamma. It's Baba Sahib Ambedkar had simplified a lot of things. The traditional story goes like this, that Yashas was a very rich young man and had a lot of wealth and property, and he was having so many friends with whom he used to party in the jungle and invite the courtesans, the dancers, to dance. And one day they had a party in the forest, and then they were all drunk, and when they were all drunk like this, the courtesan that they brought for the party, she took away all their ornaments, and his golden slipper was also taken away. And then in the morning, when Yashas got up, he saw that everything is missing, and he said, he was uttering to himself that I am lost, I am lost, I am lost, like that. And then he found the Buddha, and when it was early in the morning, and then Buddha taught him that what is the real thing that one needs to find out. That is how the traditional story of the Yashas goes. But here we have a story which is, I think, also remarkable in the sense that the Yashas, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar says, that he had a big retinue and a large harem, a lot of wives, and passed his time in nothing but dancing, drinking, and carnal pleasures. Now see, this before we saw that the Buddha taught the 5 parivrajaka who came from a very different way of life. Their way of life was attuned to asceticism, and they were practicing some form of self-mortification before they met Buddha. And so they had a very different way of lifestyle. And now contrast that lifestyle of the five Parivrajak with that of Yashas, and we see that it's very contrasting lifestyle that Yashas was living. As Baba Ambedkar has said, he had a big retinue and a large harem, passed his time in nothing but dancing, drinking, and carnal pleasures. So the Baba Ambedkar didn't relate the traditional story of he was partying in the jungle that night. As time passed, a feeling of disgust came over him. How could he escape from this orgy, this merrymaking, this fun of life? How could he escape? Was there any better way of life than the way he was leading? Not knowing what to do, he decided to leave his father's house. Okay, so this is a very simplified story that we have, but I think more than a story, what is important is, the substance of the teachings that the Buddha gave to Yashas. And we can see that the substance of the teachings we can see in the traditional Pali text. So what was his question? He was uttering to himself in madness, in a loud tones, he was uttering to himself, where am I? What is the way? Alas, what distress, alas, what danger. So you see this Yashas, like many of the people who are involved in the sensuality or a life of sensual pleasures, which is about dancing, drinking, and carnal pleasures. A question came to Yashas where he started asking questions to himself. Where am I? What is the way? What I'm doing with my life? And I think that is what that question comes to many of us. The Yashas question is not something that is his own question, but it's a question of humanity in a sense of, where am I? What is the way, alas? What distress? What a painful life is this? What danger? How dangerous it is to live a life like this? And I think having this Yashas question, as Baba Ambedkar is saying, that this happened exactly the night of the same day on which Blessed One preached his first sermon to the Panchavargiya Bhikshus. So, Buddha was, you can see I would say, the flexibility of the Buddha's mind. He could teach anybody, that is how, because he has seen through the human nature so deeply, so thoroughly, and so, I would say, methodologically, that he knew how to switch his tone of teaching from one person to another person, from one group to another person. So this happened on the night of the same day on which the Blessed One preached his first sermon to the Panchavargiya Bhikshus at Isipatan. Just when Yashas was approaching Isipatan, the Blessed One, who was staying at Isipatan, having arisen at dawn, was walking up and down in the open air. And the Blessed One saw Yashas, the noble youth, coming from after giving utterances to his feelings. So after hearing these cries of Yashas, what the Blessed One said, he said, there is no distress. Because Buddha, has saw into the truth of the world, and he has seen the reality. He saw that there is no distress, there is no danger. Come, he said to Yashas, come. And what I will do, I will show you the way. And the Blessed One preached his gospel to Yashas. And his small discourse we can find out in the Pali text. And Yashas, when he heard it, became glad and joyful. And he put off his gilt slippers. He left his golden slippers aside and went and sat down near the Blessed One and respectedly saluted him. Yashas, hearing the Buddha's words, requested the Blessed One to take him as a disciple. Then he bade him come and asked him to be a bhikkhu, to which Yashas agreed. Now see, why this is very important is to understand the Yashas conversion, because when Buddha was on the conversion campaign, he converted a lot of people, and he converted highs and lowly people, poor people, rich people, kings, and learned people, and so on and so forth. So these examples that we see in this book 2 are all about the range of the converts that the Buddha had. And Yashas, one of the rich man, a kind of in the traditional text, you can see Yashas as somebody like a vagabond. He was a vagabond, a spoiled youth, who had no direction in his life, and the Buddha gave the direction to his life, and then he became the disciple of the Buddha. We can say that he was the sixth person who became the bhikkhu. Yashas was the sixth person who became the bhikkhu. In the traditional Pali text, there were about 50 of his friends who were parting with Yashas in the forest. But here we have a reference of 4 friends who also took refuge in the Buddha's Dhamma, and they were all belonging to very wealthy family from Benares. And that time Benares was a very rich sort of a city, a kind of a center for trade and commerce, because the Ganges flow inside Benares, and that was one of the main modes of transportation of that time. So we can see that these 4 also became the disciples of the Buddha, and Baba Saheb Ambedkar has given their name: Vimala, Subahu, Punyajit, and Gavampati. So you see, like how this is how the conversion campaign takes place. The Buddha teaches somebody, they teach somebody, and that's how people became the disciples of the Buddha. Now this has happened with Yashas. Okay, so traditionally it is said that after Yasha's conversion, there were about 60 bhikshus. Buddha had, and this was a very important sort of a conversion of Yashas, because the rich people, rich young boys, joined the Sangha. And Yasha's parents were, of course, not happy with this conversion. But when Buddha told him that how important it was for Yashas to become the bhikkhu, then they were ultimately convinced, and that story is very beautifully narrated in the traditional Pali text. So we will leave Yasha there as a person just after the the very next day, after preaching the Panchavargya Bhikkhu, the Buddha converted Yasha and everything. We will leave Yasha and his friends there. So section 2, I think, is very important, because the traditional story is very, very interesting. And it is said to be one of the second sermons of the Buddha traditionally. It is called Adicca Paryayo, means the fire sermon. And the context of the fire sermon is very interesting, very interesting. And particularly these lines, like the Buddha says that, in Pali Buddha says, Sabbam Adittam, means everything is burning, everything is on fire. And then the Buddha says, Kena Gina, means by which fire? And the Buddha answers, Raga Gina, Dosa Gina, Moha Gina. I think this image of fire comes everywhere in the Buddha's teachings. And I think this fire sermon comes in the context of the fire worshippers. So now on the next of his journey, there was a family of Kassapa, and they were the fire worshippers. And some people say that they were Zoroastrians, the Parsis who still worship the fire. For them, the fire worship is very important, and all over the places in the synagogues, you will see that the fire is burning the entire day. And so some people claim that these Kassapas were the fire worshippers. But of course, there is this very beautiful Pali Sutta, Adicca Paryayo, and very, very important sermon, that fire sermon. We can call it fire sermon. And I recommend all of you to kindly go through it. Maybe I will pass you over the link of the Adicca sermon. So how that sermon took place, and you see, Baba Saheb's genius is to bring back a lot of things together and give us in a very accessible format. The original story, of course, goes like this: that there were 3 brothers, the Kassapas, and the elder brother was called, this is Uruvela Kashyap, because he was living in Uruvela, though they came from Benares. One was living near river, so he was called Nadi Kashyap. And there was, of course, Gaya Kashyap, one who was living in Gaya. If you had visited Buddha Gaya, you can see all these places, Uruvela and Gaya, and so on and so forth. So these 3 brothers came from the fire worshipping family, and they had this. The elder brother took sannyasa, and then 2 of the younger brothers thought that they would also take sannyasa. And having taken sannyasa, they all became fire worshippers. So the fire worshippers, they had this long hair, and they used to tend fire. They used to worship fire all the time. And they were also known as the Jatilas because they had this long hair locks like this. So they were also known as the Jatilas, and they were very famous. You can see how famous they were. Huh? So this Uruvela Kashyap had the ashram in Uruvela, and his two brothers also became the sannyasis, and they were Agnihotris. They were the worshipper of the fire, and they were also called Jatilas because they kept long hair, and they were very popular. They were very popular at the time in Benares, and they had a long, huge following. Particularly the young elder brother had 500 followers. Okay, and then the Nadi Kashyap had 300 followers, and the younger brother has 200 followers. So the traditional story goes like this: that the Buddha converts all of them, beginning with the elder brother, and then that he cuts his jatas, and he throws them in the river. And when the jatas flow in the river, his brother observes that who is staying near river, and he says, "Oh, something might have gone wrong with my brother." So he inquires, and he comes to know that his brother has become a Buddhist, and then another brother also becomes Buddhist, and they are converted. They are all becoming, Buddhist. They are all becoming bhikkhus. The traditional story is like this: that the elder Kassapa, this very interesting guy, Uruvela Kashyap, is very proud of his teachings and his methods. Very proud, and he, according to the story, traditional story, he is troubled by Naga. So you see, that is a very interesting, take here which Baba Ambedkar has given, because in the traditional text that Naga is not named. It is only said that the Buddha is troubled by the Naga. Now, also in the book Who Were Untouchables, Baba Ambedkar said that we cannot take these Nagas as these other species from human beings. They are like the names of the human communities. Very beautifully, Baba Sahib said Kannara, Kinnara, Gandharva, all these were the human communities, the names of the different human settlements. So the Nagas were, of course, the human group. And there was this, according to Baba Sahib's this section 2, there was this Naga whose name was Muchalinda Naga. Now, this Muchalinda Naga might be a native king of the Bodh Gaya or somewhere nearby, or you might be a very big man nearby in Bodh Gaya, because we know that we have seen this very famous image of the Buddha where the Buddha is meditating, and a snake with a hood is protecting the Buddha, and it is said that Naga is the Muchalinda Naga. So that's a mythological sort of a story. But if we take it as, in the human form, Muchalinda Naga was a benefactor of Buddhism. And the Nagas were the supporter of the Buddhism. Buddha is called the Mahanaga, the boss of the Nagas. And according to one, historical accounts, Ashoka himself called a Naga. So, this Naga who was troubling this Uruvela Kashyap is not some kind of a mythical Naga, but Naga in a human form. But traditionally, the story is like this, that he challenges the Buddha to stay in the place where the fire worship is taking place, because that is the place where Naga comes in the night and troubles everybody. So Uruvela Kashyap throws a challenge to the Buddha that, okay, come, if you want to, stay with me, but you stay in that room where the fire sacrifice or fire worship is being conducted. So the Buddha accepts the challenge, and that night when Buddha is in that room, Muchalinda Naga comes, and seeing the Buddha, because he's already knowing the Buddha, because I think under the Bodhi tree, or when it was raining heavily after Buddha's enlightenment, it was the Muchalinda Naga who protected the Buddha. So he sees Buddha, and seeing the Buddha's peaceful face and peaceful demeanor, he is already enchanted by the Buddha, and he salutes the Buddha very peacefully, and they had a very good time in that context of friendship and that love between Muchalinda Naga and the Buddha. So fearing that this Naga might kill the Buddha, Uruvela Kashyap is restless. And according to the traditional account, a lot of fire came out, a lot of light came out from that room. And Uruvela Kashyap thought that the Buddha might have been overpowered by the Naga. So that is what is the traditional story. But here, what happens is when the next morning when Uruvela Kashyap goes to the Buddha's room and he sees that, when he sees that everything is peaceful and the Buddha is still there, this Uruvela Kashyap thinks that, let Buddha stay here as long as he wants, because that's how he will protect his ashram from the onslaught of the Nagas. So we can read this story like this, that, the Uruvela Kashyap had this thing in his mind to protect his ashram from the onslaught of the Nagas, and he lets Buddha stay with him so that, he had two motives. Kashyapa's motive was to obtain protection against Muchalinda Naga. The blessed Lord thought that one day Kashyapa will give him opportunity to propound his gospel, but Buddha was trying to look out for an opportunity to teach Uruvela Kashyap. And then one day, and I think we all have to read this passage very seriously. So the Buddha one day asked the Kashyapa, "Are you an Arahant?" He asked him a question. Uruvela, Kashyapa, are you an Arahant? Kashyapa said, "I do not know what is it to be an Arahant. Will you explain it to me? What is it to be an Arahant?" And I think that's, a lot of questions, a lot of things in our community or, elsewhere, the discussion about who is an Arahant and this thing. But I think Baba Sahib Ambedkar offers a very profound key to knowing who is and what is an Arahant. The Lord then told Kashyapa. What did the Lord tell Kashyapa? An Arahant is one who has conquered all the passions which disturb a man from pursuing the Eightfold Path. You see how beautifully put up definition of an Arahant. So who is an Arahant? Who is an Arahant? One who has conquered all the passions which disturbed a man from pursuing the Eightfold Path. So anybody who has conquered their passion, their fire, okay, not this fire, but the fire of Raga, Dosha and Moha, which disturbed a man from pursuing the Eightfold Path. See, the Eightfold Path, the theme of Eightfold Path is recurring again and again. Baba Sahib Ambedkar is always pointing us out to the very fundamental basic Buddhism. He's always pointing us out to the Noble Eightfold Path. As far as, Baba Sahib Ambedkar is concerned, he's drilling us into understanding the Noble Eightfold Path. And we have seen how beautifully and meticulously he has expounded the Noble Eightfold Path. In the previous discussions, we have seen that. And I think here, very interestingly, the definition, I think, which we all need to ponder upon is, and I'm going to read again, I'm sorry to bother you, but because this is very profound, where one gets the importance of these definitions when we read this Pali text, knowing, there are a lot of technical things, but the way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has simplified it, an Arahant is one who has conquered all passions which disturbed a man from pursuing the Eightfold Path. Agnihotra cannot cleanse a man of his sins. So worshipping the fire, Agnihotra, cannot cleanse you from the sins. So, this Kashyapa was a very proud man and he had 500 followers. So he couldn't accept. Okay, he did not feel the force. He did feel the force of the Buddha's argument, making his mind pliant and yielding until at length prepared to be a vehicle of the true law. He confessed that his poor wisdom could not compare with the wisdom of the world-honored one. He confessed to the Buddha that whatever Buddha is talking about, he doesn't understand. And he confessed that, his poor wisdom could not compare with the wisdom of the world-honored one. And so convinced at last, humbly submitted, Uruvela Kashyap accepted the doctrine of the Lord and became his follower. So that's how Kashyapa, Uruvela Kashyap, became the follower of the Buddha after this beautiful dialogue. And then I have already shared you a story as to how the two brothers became the disciples of the Buddha. And Nadi Kashyap and Gaya Kashyap, they were staying downstream and they found that the jatas are cut and thrown into the river, and they started flowing in the river, and two brothers understood that something had happened. And when they came to know that their brother had become the follower of the Buddha, they also became the follower of the Buddha. So we can imagine now that time the Buddha had about 1,000 disciples. These 500 followers of the elder Kashyap, and in the two brothers 500 followers, 1,000 people becoming the Buddhists, and that was a big news. It should have been a kind of headline in the city of Varanasi that time. Breaking news that so many people have gone and taken refuge in the Buddha's Dhamma. So he has given a very wonderful discourse, and as I said, that I would recommend all of you to read it. Babasaheb Ambedkar has given the gist of that discourse, the fire sermon, and it is one of the very earliest teachings of the Buddha, the fire sermon. Very beautifully, you read it in the Pali, and then you read it in your any language, and you understand the beauty of that teachings. So in his discourse, the summary of the discourse that Babasaheb has offered, in his discourse to the two brothers, the Blessed Lord said, the dark smoke of ignorance arises while confused thoughts like wood drilled into wood create the fire. You see, that time, the mechanism to create the fire was to rub the two pieces of the dry woods. And when you rub them, the fire will come, fire will erupt. That's how you produce the fire at that time. So the dark smoke of ignorance arises. How does the dark smoke of ignorance arise? The Buddha said, with the confused thoughts. So when more confused thoughts come together and they rub with each other, more and more, the dark smoke of ignorance arises. So confusion of the thoughts is a reason that the dark smoke of ignorance arises. And then, as I said, that the small discourse I told you about, the Buddha asked that Sabbam Aditam, the whole, everything is on the fire. If you look around, everything is on the fire. Today also everything is on the fire. Because of the greed, hatred, and delusion of the people, everything is burning, everything is getting destroyed. You imagine the image of that destruction due to fire. So the Buddha says in the verse number 39, lust, anger, delusion, these are as fire produced, and these inflame and burn all other things which cause grief and sorrow in the world. So important is verse number 39. Babasaheb Ambedkar captures the gist of the fire sermon here. Lust, anger, delusion, these are as fire produced, and these inflame and burn all other things which cause grief and sorrow in the world. If once this way is found, and lust, anger, and delusion consumed, then with it is born sight, knowledge, and pure conduct. So if you find out the way to quench this fire, then what happens is the insight is born, the knowledge is born, and the pure conduct arises. So when the heart of a man has once conceived distaste for sin, this distaste removes covetous desire extinguished, there is recluse. That's how a saint is found. Who is a saint? So a saint is somebody in whom the covetous desires have extinguished. The great rishis listening to him lost all regard for fire worship and wished to be the disciples of the Buddha. The conversion of the Kashyapas was a great trump for the Blessed Lord, for they had a very strong hold on the imagination of the people, because they were so popular. These fire worshippers were so popular in the city of Benares and elsewhere, that when they got converted, that had a big impact on the imagination of the people. And I'm going to go through the section number 3. I was initially thinking that I would go through all the sections today, but then I thought that I should touch upon some of the points that are very important from the dharmic point of view, like how Buddha taught yashas, and the gross materialism in which the Yasha and his friends were engrossed in, and then the story of the Kashyapa. And now we are going to look at how Sariputra and Moglan were converted, and with that we will stop. Okay, this is a very interesting story. So while the Buddha, Blessed One, was in Rajagraha, there resided a well-known person by name Sanjaya. His full name is Sanjaya Belatiputta. And Sanjay Belatiputta was one of the very famous philosophers of that time. Sanjay Belatiputta, very famous. And he had a great revenue of the Parivrajaks. So they were already Parivrajaks, numbering about 250 as his disciples. And two of his remarkable disciples, his very strong disciples, were Sariputta and Moglan. And somehow the Sariputta and Moglan were not satisfied with what Sanjay Belatiputta was teaching them, and therefore, they were very good friends in the history of Buddhism. Sariputra and Moglan are considered to be the examples of the best friends, the ideal friendship. They were like, you can say there is a story of three Aniruddha. There were three monks whose names were the same, three Aniruddha, but they were very good friends, very, very good friends. And we know that in Buddhism, the friendship is considered to be very high virtue. And such was the friendship of this Sariputra and Moglan. They were very, very fast friends. And they decided that whoever finds the way first, the other will just follow that. That was their commitment to each other. So in the city of Rajagraha, one of the monks among the Panchavargya Bhikshu, and his name is Ashwajit, and the Pali name is Assaji. Okay, Assaji is a Pali name, and if we want to translate it into today's language, Ashwajit. Ashwajit was his name, and he was in the alms round, and he was walking very, very mindfully in the city of Rajagraha. He's very peaceful. He's at ease with everything. Maybe he's practicing metta in his mind, and he's walking very beautifully, very mindfully in the city of Rajagraha for his alms. And Sariputra sees this, and upon seeing Ashwajit walking like that, Sariputra at once know that this person is one of those monks who are the worthy ones in the world. He is immediately struck by the demeanor of Ashwajit, and he says that he must be one of those monks who are the worthy ones in the world. What if I were to approach this monk and to ask him, in whose name, friend, have you retired from the world? Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you profess? These were the questions among the philosophers of that time. Who is your teacher? What do you follow? So the same question arose in the minds of Sariputra, that when he saw Ashwajit walking like this, and then he didn't disturb him because he was on his alms round, but after he took his alms, went outside of the village, sat under the tree, and was after finishing his meals, Sariputra approached him. He exchanged the greetings, and with complacent words, he stood at his side, and standing at his side, the wandering ascetic Sariputra said to Venerable Assaji. You see, Sariputra and Moglan were already ascetic. They were not living a home life. They were already parivrajak. They were already homeless. Okay, but they were trying to find out the truth, and they thought that their teacher might give them the truth. Sanjay Belatiputta, who was not able to satisfy their intellectual, spiritual needs that time. So, in whose name, friend, have you retired from the world? Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you profess? And this is Assajit's beautiful reply. There is, friend, the great recluse of the Sakya clan, Sakya Muni. In this blessed one's name have I retired from the world. This blessed one is my teacher, and it is the Dhamma of this blessed one that I follow. And what, venerable sir, is the doctrine which your teacher holds, and what does he preach to you? This is the question of Sariputra. Behold, my dear friends, this is going to be very interesting. Okay. So what Assaji says, he says, I am only a young disciple, friend. I have but recently received ordination. I have just become the bhikkhu. And I have newly adopted this Dhamma and discipline. I cannot. Dhamma and discipline means Dhamma and Vinaya. Whenever the word comes, discipline is a Vinaya in the context of Dhamma and Vinaya. Okay. I cannot explain to you the Dhamma in detail, but I will tell you in short what it means. Now, then Sariputra, the wandering ascetic, said to the Venerable Assaji, so be it, friend, tell me as much as or as little as you like, but tell me the meaning. I want just the meaning. What makes so much of the letter? I want the essence. Don't make, in Buddhism, it said that you go after the meaning, not after the words. So you'll see, it's a very beautifully conceived paragraph, I would say. He says, Why do you make so much of the letters? Don't make so much of the alphabets and the words. You just tell me the meaning, whatever little or whatever big that is, just give me the meaning. See, that is the earnestness. So because upon seeing Ashwajit, Sariputra is already converted. He has never seen such a man who is walking such a mindful gait, and he's so at peace with himself. So he's already converted. He wants to know, tell me the meaning. Don't spare the words. You give me the meaning. Then the Venerable Assaji explained to Sariputra the substance of the teachings of the Buddha, and Sariputra was completely satisfied. Now, what substance Assajit told to Sariputra, we don't know here in the context, but in the traditional Pali text we know what Assajit told Sariputra, and I'm going to tell you. This is very important. That essence of the Dhamma. So what the essence of the Dhamma that Assajit communicates to Sariputra? He says in Pali, "Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam sabbangtang vaya dhammam." Means yang kinchi, whatever. Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam, whatever has the cause or the principle of arising has a cause and principle of passing away. Means whatever arises passes away. Without passing away, nothing can arise. So arising and passing goes hand in hand. And the Buddha expounds the principle of that. Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam sabbam tam vaya dhammam. And this essence of Buddhism, this essence of the Dhamma is so much celebrated in the Buddhist history. It's also then developed into a formula which you found all over the in the Buddhist caves and everywhere. That formula becomes the basis for deciphering the Brahmi script, and that's how we know that the Buddha was born here, when the script was deciphered. And that formula, extended formula of this is this: ye dhamma hetu pabbhava tesang hetu tathagato aho tesang cha nirodho evam vadi mahasamano. You get this in Pali, you get this in Tibetan, you get this in Sanskrit, all over the languages. You get this central teaching of the Buddha, Paticca Samutpad. So this is the substance that Ashwajit explains to Sariputra, and Sariputra is converted immediately, sure that this is what he needs to follow. So coming back to this Ashwajit's this thing explaining substance of the teachings of the Buddha, and Sariputra was completely satisfied. Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam sabbangtang vaya dhammam. Whatever arises passes away. Nothing can arise without having the principle of passing away. So accordingly, Sariputra went to the place where Moggallon was. Seeing him, he said to Sariputra, "Your countenance, friend, is serene. Your complexion is pure and bright." So he was so, taken up by that truth that Sariputra immediately had this, what you can say, glow on his face. And upon seeing that, Moggallana knew that his friend found out the way, and they both wanted to leave Sanjay Belatiputta. They in fact asked Sanjay Belatiputta to leave, to go to the Buddha, and Sanjay Belatiputta denied. And he didn't go, but he offered them the similar sort of leadership to Sariputra and Moggallon. Sanjay offered them that, but they declined, and they went to the Buddha and they got ordained in the Buddha's Sangha. And upon seeing these two approaching from a distance, the Buddha apparently said that these two are going to be my chief pair of disciples, and auspicious pair. Not only chief, but also the auspicious pair. There was the beauty of Sariputra and Moggallon. They were so devoted to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha that their stories, the stories of their friendship, they abound in the Buddhist literature. Sariputra and Moggallon. Everywhere you see Buddha is in the middle, and Sariputra and Moggallon on the side of the Buddha. So this was the conversion, and then the Buddha used the traditional formula of "Ei bhikkhave, come and share. Come and share the burden I'm carrying on. Come, join everybody." And the Blessed One then uttered the usual formula indicating admission: "Ei bhikkhave, come monks." And Sariputra and Moggallon and the 200 Jatilas became the disciples of the Buddha. Again, these disciples, 250 of the disciples of the Sanjay Belatiputta, they accepted the Buddha's teaching. So we will stop here. with these 3 sections completed, and I will throw open the class for discussion for next 20 minutes. Anybody would like to respond? Sunil sir.
Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim, very nice talk. I am sorry I joined somewhat late.
No issues.
After 15 minutes I joined. Just I wanted to know what was that basic teaching of Sanjay, that these
See, Sanjay Bela put, there are these 6 philosophers that we studied. If we refer back to the previous references, there is a story of the 6. See, there is this story of this 6. If you refer to the page number 98 of the English version, and this
okay,
verse number 6, Sanjay Belataputta had his own school of philosophy. It was known as Vikshep Vada, a kind of skepticism. Okay, so they were skeptic about a lot of things, So they were skeptics. He argued, if anyone asked me, is there heaven? If I feel there was, I would say yes. But if I feel there was no heaven, I would say no. So skepticism, they were always doubting. You can take it as a kind of an intellectual philosophical tradition, which is very popular even today, called skepticism. You don't accept anything. You are skeptical about everything. Okay. And to some extent, the Buddha was also a skeptic in a sense that he didn't accept. He wanted to probe deeply. But the Buddha has a method to probe deeply into the truth, what is called the Dhamma. So even today, if you look at even the Western philosophical tradition, you will find this branch of philosophy or school of thought in the philosophy called skepticism. Some people say that Nagarjuna was a skeptic. He doubted everything. So you can start doubting everything. But, there is a limit to that indecision and doubting. Somewhere you have to find a method by which you can train yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
That is one of the methods of learning.
That's one of the methods of learning. And it's not bad. Buddha is showing the limitations of that. He's not denying that,
Yeah, unless you doubt, you will not go into the deep.
Exactly. So that's how that might be the training of Sariputra and Mogglayan to doubt everything that made them so talented in the Dhamma.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Okay, nice. Very good. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
Jai Bhim, sir. Samiksha here.
Samiksha.
I was just thinking, sir, this as you explained this important doctrine of Paticca Samutpad.
Yes.
So in this book, we don't see why Baba Saheb have not explained this such an important doctrine in this book. What are your thoughts on this?
There is a long discussion on cause and effect. There is a long discussion. We have to pick from different things. There is this Karya Karan Bhav. It is not only in the Buddha and Dhamma, but it's also there in the speech that Baba Saheb Ambedkar has given in 1936. Buddha talks about the Paticca Samutpad there in, I think, Mukti Kon Pathe. He says that he recognizes only the freedom of mind, and the freedom of mind is possible only for those who understand the Paticca Samutpad, Karya Karan Bhav. Okay, so Karya Karan Bhav Paticca Samutpad is the Dhamma. So one who understands the Paticca Samutpad understands the Dhamma, and one who understands the Dhamma understands the Buddha's teachings. And here you will find references, even in this part 3, you will find references, a lot of references to the Patichamutpad. Okay.
Also, sir, is it because like in traditional Buddhism, we see like this the doctrine is linked to like first two links are linked to previous birth, and then middle to current life, and then last to future life. So
Yeah.
is that also the reason like Baba Sahib wanted to just
No, actually, Samiksha, there are, I would say there are like, as far as I know, there are 20, 30 formulations of the Patichamutpad. It's not just one. And, it is like a list of the things. Actually, nobody can very categorically say that this is what it is, because the Buddha himself has taught Patichamutpad in many ways. So in the sutta like Madhupindaka Sutta, the Buddha has taught Patichamutpad in terms of how the conflict arises in the society, why there is a violence in the society. In some places, the Buddha has talked about Patichamutpad. Even the Four Noble Truths are Patichamutpad, Dukkha and the cause of Dukkha, Dukkha Nirodha and the cause of Dukkha Nirodha, isn't it? So it's always there. This is inbuilt in Buddhism, isn't it? We don't have to go for the specific formulation of Avijja Pacha Sankhara, Sankhara Pacha Vigyan, Vinga Vijnana Pacha, Namrup, and so on and so forth. We don't have to go according to that formula. That's a good formula to go with, but there are a lot of formulations of the Patichamutpada, and we have to understand it in the context, the way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has understood it, to know what are the reasons of certain things to arise. It's actually a scientific method by which you try to know the reason, the causes of certain things. Why this thing arise? What are the causes that are leading up to this particular phenomena? So on and so forth. So I think as an Ambedkarite Buddhist, we take an attitude of Patichamutpad, which Baba Sahib Ambedkar has taken, isn't it? To understand the causality, to understand the theory of cause and effect. Okay, so it's there. It's not that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has denied it, and this way of putting forth Patichamutpada is challenged by people like Buddha Ghosha, Buddha Das, who challenged Buddha Ghosha's interpretation of Patichamutpada into 3 types of times, like past, present, and future, because the Patichamutpada is taking place continuously in front of us. It's not that we have to talk about the past life, because the Vidya is there. It's there in us even now as I'm speaking. So it's there are a lot of formulations. There is a beautiful formulation in the text called Mahayana text called the Rice Seedling Sutta, and it's very beautifully explained there. The Buddha gets up in the morning and he is looking at the paddy field, and when he's looking at the paddy field, he smiles. So somebody goes to his Maitreya and asks him why the Buddha smiled looking at the stalk of the paddy. Then he says that the Buddha smiled at the truth of understanding how the rice seedlings comes. So for example, depending on the seed, seed leads to the sprouting leads to the shoot leads to the leaves, and then the leaves leads to the the total development of the plant, then the flowers, and then the seeds, like that. He explains. So he says that as a seed as a condition, as a cause, seed as a cause, the sprout comes. So that's one way. And then he goes to explain on another way. He says that with water as a condition, with air as a condition, with soil as a condition, so causes and condition. Very beautiful. I will also forward that link to all of you so that you can study if you want to the Patichamutpad.
Sure, sir, sure. Thank you.
Anything else?
Sujata, who gave the key to Buddha, just becoming when he was Siddhartha, is said to be the mother of Yasha. And she used to go every month on Purnima night, I think so, to worship that tree. She used to believe that she is some god living there. And when she saw the Siddharth there in that condition, she thought her praise have been accepted. And the second thing about Yasha was like, and the five Yash and the five friends decided to do social service. So in that they found the dead body of one pregnant lady, and Yash was the one who has the role to take care of the last rituals and all for that pregnant lady. So in that he developed uh, uh, the truth regarding the sensual pleasures, and this question arised in his mind. Everything is burning. And my question to you is that, and one request to you also there, like, uh, it doesn't happen that in a click of a second that Yasha become an arhat and Sotapanna.
Good.
Yeah. So he heard the traditional the Magafala and Dana Katha and Sila Katha and Saga Katha, and then Magafala plus Nibbana. That was the Dhammadesana by Buddha given to Yasha. So in today's time, there are many youths just like the Yasha who has fallen from the path, and as you have said, he has the example of, like, in today's time we can say the influencer, because Yasha was the influencer, and here because his friends were influenced that after seeing Yasha has taken the Prabhaja, everyone followed him, his friends. So now today's scenario, there will be many youths who has fallen from the path or not, or what you will say, what is your message to the youngsters in today's generation to so that they can follow the noble eightfold path, or walk righteously on the noble eightfold path.
Good question. I think it needs deep reflection, Rucha madam, because I think this is a too big a question to be answered in this context. And I think they should read Buddha and his Dhamma. They should follow Baba Saheb Ambedkar. There is a lot of things the youths can do, but we have to find the pedagogy of teaching them. Maybe I think the Malaysian Buddhists have got that. They have this beautiful musical groups where they inspire youths to come and sing together. Maybe we have to learn from Christianity a lot of things to open the doors to the Dhamma for many people. I think there is not a simple answer to this. And mobilization of the youth is a big question. We have got good youths among us. We have Dishant, we have Nikhil, we have other people. We have very promising young people, and I'm sure that more and more they come in contact with the Baba Sahib's writings and speeches, Buddha's Dhamma. They will inspire. There is no message as such. That we can. There is no magical wand. There is that we are not Asajit, or the people are not Sariputras, that the one sentence might just clunk, just click them. So you if you consider yourself as a young person, you can find out the ways as to what motivates the young people and all like that. I don't think there is a very simple answer to these questions, like how you motivate the youths. Maybe Alka madam may be having some kind of insights into that. Alka madam, would you like to say something on this? If not, anybody would like to respond, maybe some youths. Rucha, you yourself?
Sir, may I?
Yes, Samiksha, please go on.
I think in other countries, I think Sri Lanka and all, we see, I don't have the facts, but I am sure that we do have, like we see more number of Shramner or Shramneris. But in India, I don't find like our people sending kids to become Shramner or Shramneri, forget about Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni. So Shramner, below the age of 20, we have to, anyone can become Shramner or Shramneri. So this need to be analyzed, like why parents are not sending them. So once we develop this culture, when parents send, so eventually youths will also gradually gain the insights of Buddhism and then follow this path. So why they are not sending, and do they still have the Hindu belief system in them? That's why they are not sending, or what's the reason? Like we don't see much kids becoming Shramner or Shramneris. So
May I suggest you to something, maybe you and Rucha can get together with, and, just try to find out the reasons as to why, how to attract the youth to Dhamma, and maybe present in one of the conference or something, because I think it's very important, vital topic. We just have a small survey, what does the youth want? How do they want to learn like that? What are the experiences of the other countries, what they are doing? Because to me, India is the only country on this earth where the youths are getting attracted towards Buddhism. And all over the places, there are only old people in Buddhism. Everywhere you go, the percentage of the young people is very less. India is the only country which is the future of Buddhism. Because wherever I go, I only see youths all over the places. So I think maybe Rucha and Samiksha, you two can get together, maybe team up and find out the reasons and the experience of the other countries as to, you just stretch your mind as to why, what kind of pedagogy the young people need. Maybe have a small survey also. Nikhil, you think it's a good idea?
Yes, sir, surely we can have that survey as well.
Harsh bhai, what do you think?
You ask me?
Yes, I'm asking you, Harsh.
Sorry, there's a lot of background noise at my end today.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
But you understood what we are talking about?
Yes, definitely. I have a couple of questions. I recently started my 6-month course in this Mahabodhi Research Center.
Good.
They are teaching a lot of things. So I have a couple of doubts on that. So I will probably try to recollect and list them together, and maybe next session I will ask that.
Okay, no problem. But this question of attracting youths that they have thrown open.
Yes, I am very much into that. I want to be a part of that bandwagon, and I have lots of ideas also. But unless and until we come together and speak and discuss continuously,
Yes.
not be shaped properly.
All right, then maybe
Actually, with youth, I think so. When we talk something heavy, it's not get easily digestible. We need to mold our ways so that it is highly acceptable by them in today's language or today's
yes.
short forms and yo-yo language, or just like the cheat sheet example discussion going on in a group. Cheat sheet is not a word dissected into words like cheat and sheet. It's like cheat sheet, and they get to know it. Like it's not like taken in a negative sense, but if elderly people have different perspective to look into that word, so we need to mold our ways so that it is easily acceptable by
Good.
youth like me.
I think that will be if you can come up with that kind of examples or how develop a pedagogy, nothing like that, Rucha madam. And I think some of you can really start thinking about these things seriously as to how it can be done. So we are nearing the end of a class today, and I think we should go on with these classes in a sense of finishing the Buddha and his Dhamma. It will take quite a long time, but I think you begin to see the beauty and the importance of studying like this, that we tend to clarify for ourselves, bring in the connections between different parts of the Buddha and his Dhamma. And I think let's have this attitude of studying the Buddha and his Dhamma together collectively. And I think it's also time for us to be more, I would say, provocative, to be more. Sunanda, madam, you want to say something?
No.
Do you want to say something? Okay.
No.
Okay, so be more proactive, I would say, and as some of you can take the responsibilities of mobilizing youths, some of us can do other stuff like that. So I think let's do that. Let's have some agenda coming up, and we will follow it up. So thank you so much for joining the class today, and see you next week.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.